questions and calls of customers so that other staff, like our licensing analysts, can dedicate their time and attention to processing license applications. Since the call center team was implemented last year, we've seen a significant decrease in the processing times of our staff. During COVID-19, our processing times were well over 70 days, and now our processing times are under a week for most of our professions. We also established a licensed litigation management team that is dedicated to helping licensed practitioners navigate the administrative hearing and disciplinary processes of the state of Indiana. We also expanded our IT team that is dedicated on delivering critical projects in an efficient and timely manner. The state of the Indiana General Assembly last year also passed legislation that requires state boards, commissions, and agencies to stream and record all public meetings. This law does not actually go into effect in Indiana until July 1st of 2025, but our agency recognized the need and demand to implement streaming of our public meetings much faster, given that so many of our licensed practitioners are not physically present here in Indiana and work across state lines. So toward the beginning of, or as of last year and toward the beginning of this year, we obtained the infrastructure necessary to live stream our board's public meetings and also allow virtual participation of certain licensed practitioners under certain circumstances. Streaming and recording of our meetings also gives our public and consumers far greater access to our boards, and our meetings have never been more transparent. We also recently recognized that many practitioners struggle with scope of practice and struggle to navigate and understand the year-to-year changes in regulation. So as of this year, we created a web form in which licensed practitioners can essentially request a practice ruling if they have a particular question about what is required of them in their scope of practice based on their factual circumstances. They submit their request through our online form. The agency's legal team will then review their request and draft a recommended non-rule policy statement based on the interpretation of the regulation. These draft statements are then introduced to the individual boards, such as the Board of Physical Therapy, to consider for adoption. And if our boards adopt those policy statements are then published in the Indiana Register as well as our online website. Even though we've made significant changes here in Indiana over the last couple of years, we feel that this is just the beginning. Our agency, beginning next year and through the next biennium, will undertake the development of a completely new state-of-the-art licensing system, which we hope will obviously meet the operational needs of our agency today and in the future, and also serve the needs of our licensed practitioners and the general public. We also intend to develop data dashboards within our system that will be published on our website, with the hopes that our data will be utilized to support evidence-based, data-driven policy. Once again, I'd like to thank the Federation very much for this awesome recognition. We look forward to our continued partnership and collaboration with the Federation and our fellow state boards and agencies, and we wish all of you the best both during and after this year's annual education meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, how about a virtual kapow? 1, 2, 3, kapow! Nice, nice. Bring it, bring it, bring it. All right, Terry Jo Bunner from Georgia is up next.
Thank you. I'm going to follow in Rich's corny presentation since we're in Iowa. But I wanted to start off with, did you know that corn, more specifically the number of kernels of corn per ear of corn, represent fertility, growth, and offspring? Since we are in the world's largest corn processing city in the U.S., it actually got me thinking, if this is true of kernels of corn, what would we say about the kernels that our boards represent? Most of us would likely say things like safety, health, welfare, competence, supervision, and regulation, because these are the things outlined in most of our practice acts. This makes sense as our practice acts can assist boards in carrying out the provisions of the law relevant to physical therapy. But seldom does the Practice Act help us to cultivate those kernels into what an ear of corn represents, and that is a unified and sustainable foundation that maximizes our efforts. I don't know about in your state, but in Georgia, we have quickly discovered that the board and the board staff were repeatedly asked and expected to do more with less. The number of the applicants for licensure has continued to grow year after year. New laws are being implemented regularly, requiring additional assessments and administrative oversight, and what was common practice in the field yesterday may not be the same today and may possibly be obsolete tomorrow. Yet the funding for our board and the number of staff have remained the same. Gradually, we begin to see the reputations of our board, as well as 41 others within our division, diminish in the eyes of the very people we are charged to protect and serve. In many ways, the Georgia Board felt powerless to change its reputation. We do not have our own budget, so we could not hire more staff or purchase new management systems, nor could we lobby to change, as to do so could be considered a violation of the Code of Conduct and Ethics of a public officer in our state. Ultimately, we resolved to focus on things that we could do rather than over the things that we could not. This is where our strategic planning has come into play. I would say that much of the work that we have done over the past year, though multifaceted, can be categorized into two major kernels of innovation: the automation and analysis of data and increasing board member engagement. The automation and analysis of data through technology can improve efficiency by reducing the amount of manual effort and eliminating bottlenecks. The Georgia Online Application Licensing System, better known as GOLS, is a system that captures and validates and updates much of the application process with artificial intelligence. Of course, we talked about that earlier today. Freeing our overworked and underpaid staff to focus on high-priority files, and allows applicants and licensees to have more direct access to view their records with the board. Since the board has its meetings on Zoom and/or WebEx already, we have partnered with CE Broker, who is our repository for continuing competence data, and APTA of Georgia chapter to record a webinar that walked applicants through the license renewal process. Attendees were awarded a certificate of completion issued by the APTA of Georgia that could be used to meet the renewal requirements, and access to the materials were posted on the board and APTA of Georgia websites as a resource document for those who were not able to attend. We have also begun discussions with APTA Georgia to consider proposing amendments to the statute that would allow our board to collect at a minimum the information on the physical therapy minimum data system. Increasing board member engagement. The board chair and our executive director made a more concerted effort to increase board member engagement with FSBPT, APTA, and APTA of Georgia by instructing and assigning members of the board to attend FSBPT events and training sessions with the understanding that they will be expected to share what they have learned, volunteering to participate on FSBPT committees, using tools developed by FSBPT, such as the Board Assessment Resource, and beta testing of the Healthy Practice Resource Tool, continuing competence work, and reviewing the NPTE survey results and the consumer protection ratings regularly, just to name a few. We have increased our staff administration participation in FSBPT surveys and board members in the FSBPT webinar series, followed by discussions at each board public meetings. APTA Georgia has been instrumental in assisting our board with educating applicants and licensees on how to use the GOLS system and how to get assistance. As our office updated the data, it was shared with the chapter to post on their social media pages and on their websites and via short YouTube videos. Our board does not have a social media page or the ability to develop YouTube clips. The board voted to send formal requests to the Georgia Secretary of State and the governor for additional funding for staff as well as extensions in the license renewal process to enable licensees ample amount of time to navigate our new system. Members of the board participated in the user acceptance training for the new system so that they could also provide guidance to applicants and licensees that contacted them. All these measures combined have increased productivity, morale, and efficiency, and after a short period of turbulence, that's an understatement, just saying, is getting applicants to work sooner and assures the legislators that the PT board is effective and vital to their constituents. So rather than throwing your corn seeds on stony ground to wither away, take the time to identify ways that you can make what appears to be stony ground fertile soil. What kernels of innovation are needed in your jurisdiction that may be useful, and what measures can your board take towards fulfilling that need, and how can FSBPT or other organizations be of help?
Wow. All right, all right. Can I get a kapow? That was awesome. Thank you, thank you. Short periods of turbulence. That was like my plane landing here, I think. I was part of that. O'Day from Louisiana is our next up.
Good afternoon. O'Day LeBurn from Louisiana. I was asked by our executive director, Charlotte, to make this presentation in her absence, and she told me I had 8 minutes, and she wanted to know if she needed to present some slides for me. I didn't realize what wonderful technology we have here. If she'd have done slides, I could have read them for you. All right, so this is really good. But instead, we're going to do a little public speaking and recognizing that the toughest crowd to speak in front of is your peers. They'll call bullshit on you real quick, okay? The media calls it fact-checking, all right? We're fixing to do something that hadn't been done, and we realized that we had a problem. We thought we were being innovative. We had an online live jurisprudence course, and we used Slido, and everything's going pretty good. And we asked the slide about when is it okay to date your patient? 40% of the responses were, it depends. Okay? It never depends. We got a problem, okay? So we said, all right, we need to have a conference and a meeting where we can work with our licensees to help them better understand the practices and the pitfalls of practice so they don't get in trouble and we can continue to protect the public. Well, so we're planning a 2-day conference. And in this conference, we're going to bring some really heavy hitters. We're going to get Sharon Dunn, who's the former APTA president from Louisiana. We're going to get Sherry Peru to come and visit with us and speak. And Sherry is the co-chair of the Sexual Misconduct and Boundary Committee. And you know, sometimes we have a little problem in Louisiana understanding words and what they mean. You know, and I know a lot of people, I'm not alone in this, and said, boundary issues. What's a boundary issue, and why is our regulatory body involved in boundary issues? Well, after I've been on the board for a while, I do understand what that issue is. But we had a meeting several months ago with some of my board members, and I couldn't participate. I had an obligation with an attorney, and I called up my peers and said, listen, I can't make it this afternoon. I have to meet with my attorney on a boundary issue. And boy, they just didn't say anything. I said, how did I have a boundary issue and they didn't know about it? I said, no. I said, my neighbor built a fence in my yard, okay? That's a boundary issue. So why are we tiptoeing around the words? What's a boundary issue? It's sexual misconduct. People are confused. We're leading them to confusion by using nice words. We need to make it really clear. So we're going to have clarity. We're going to have Christina Lonsberry come and talk to us about implementing informed consent. We're going to have people from Blue Cross Blue Shield. We're going to have representatives from Medicare. We're going to have representatives from Medicaid. We're going to have representatives from HPSO, the malpractice company. We're going to have people from PBI to talk about boundary issues and addiction, so we can help our licensees not fall into the pitfalls that get them in trouble. We don't want this to be a lecture. We don't want Blue Cross to come in here and tell us how to bill. Blue Cross needs to hear from our people and the boots on the ground how their rules and their regulations and the documentation requirements are onerous and can have people get in trouble. So this is going to be a two-way, interactive, two-day session. Also, we're going to have legislators come. We're going to have current legislators to come and speak to us about current legislation and how it impacts us as regulatory boards and as healthcare providers. We're going to have former legislators come and give a history of how we got where we are with our Practice Act in Louisiana, and how sometimes you end up with poor language. Sometimes you end up with really unintended consequences by virtue of the negotiations that happen in the legislative session. So people need to understand. The biggest problem with public speaking is not only are you in front of your peers, but I come to these meetings and I'm so impressed with the knowledge, I'm so impressed with the problems and the solutions, but I really have a hard time understanding you people. You'll have so many accents, it's just, I really have to pay attention. And just last week, my 28-year-old son is, he's a pilot, and he flies first officer on a Boeing 777, and he was on a transoceanic trip to China, and they get about halfway, and they get relaxed a little, and the pilot leans over, and the captain leans over and talks to him and says, "So son, where are you from?" He said, "Well, I'm from Louisiana." He said, I picked up on that. He said, "I should have known by your accent." And my son was a little offset and said, "Well, what do you mean, my accent?" He said, "Well, let me start with this." He said, "Accent starts with a T, ends with a T." He said, you can't even say the word, so of course you have an accent. You have problems saying the word. So we move forward, and what we're attempting to do now is to have an interactive conference to make sure that people don't get in trouble so we can continue to protect the members of our public. How are we going to get PTs to show up for 2 days to talk about this? Well, we're going to bribe them, okay? We're going to give them 1/2 of their continuing education credits for relicensure to come to this meeting and speak to the board. And speak to the board in a fashion that they feel comfortable in speaking to the board. Because, the regulatory boards are kind of like the IRS. You're not going to call the IRS and ask for information on filing your taxes. You're going to get audited. So nobody wants to speak to us. Nobody wants to see a letter coming from us. So we're not necessarily the enemy, but they really don't want to talk to us. So we have to make this engaging and make this interesting, and we have to bribe them to get there. And in closing, I would tell you that we all have the same problems in each of our states, in each of our jurisdictions. We all are coming to relatively the same solutions. But sometimes when you read the written word, they mean different things to different people. So this Boudreaux and Thibodeau, they were sitting, they met on that afternoon, and Boudreaux comes up and said, "Thibodeau, what's the matter with you, man? You are red in the face, your blood pressure's up, you look like you want to kill somebody. What's the matter?" He said, "Well, I found out that Clarence is messing around with Marie." And he said, "I'm not going to tolerate it, and I'm going across the bayou right now, and I'm going to teach him a lesson." He said, "Well, man, that sounds good." He said, "Clarence is a pretty big fella. You need to be careful." It don't matter. He said, "I love Marie, and I'm going to take care of this problem." So Thibodeau goes down the road about a block, and he gets to the bridge, and he reads the sign on the bridge, and he turns around, and he comes back, and Thibodeau said, "Man, what's the matter? Why are you back so early? You finished already?" He said, "No, man." He said, "I read that sign on the bridge. It said, 'Caution, Clarence, 12 feet, 6 inches.'" I ain't going to mess with him. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I think we need a kapow with the Cajun accent. 1, 2, 3, kapow! Woo, solid. Way to bring it. Sean from Indiana.
Presentation is, it's, well, not really the bell curve. It's going to peak and then go back down. I'm the drop off because I have to follow these two, and I don't know how I'm going to do it. Sean Bagby, first time attendee, first time presenter here, and I hate public speaking, so bear with me. O'Day, thank you for LSU for taking Brian Kelly. As a Notre Dame fan, that gave us at least 2 more wins a year. Thank you. No, I know you are. Well, you can keep them. All right, so in Indiana, I'm going to talk about what we've kind of done, some things from the board-wise, and really 3 areas: challenges in overcoming inertia, innovation, and common goals. So with challenging and overcoming inertia, the biggest thing we've done is we finally did a Practice Act revision. And Megan and I were talking about it earlier. We can't exactly decide on what year the last time it was really opened, but I'm pretty sure I was not even in high school at that point. So it's been a while. We went through that. We went through the Model Practice Act workshop. And as we did this, like, one of the big things we did was really get really key stakeholders involved in moving it forward. We went through several revisions and adjusted and aligned it. And then we had to align it to some state procedural things that came into play after we thought we had everything done. So, of course, we had to go back and re-wordsmith some more stuff, but we got it to a point, and we finally got it there. One of the things I'm probably proudest of is the dry needling rule and CE requirement. And this is probably something we, as board members, I know I personally take heat on this all the time, because they're like, you put so many hours of continuing ed into it, but to protect the public, we wanted to make sure that anyone that was doing dry needling was qualified and qualified to a high enough level. And so we really looked at doing that. And again, we used FSPPT as a great resource to look at what other jurisdictions were doing and incorporated that and wrote our rules. And so now we're there, and that is passed and going on. Told you, like, I'm not as good as these two before. Innovation. So one of the biggest things we did is move on with the PT Compact, and we used FSB resources. So when we're talking about the grants that are available from here, use them. They helped us. They helped us immensely get there. We've been able to get in a new API system, and that helped us with the ELDD. And Megan's sitting back there as a member of the ELDD. I'm sure she never liked it when Indiana was probably lagging behind in that, but now we're finally catching up. So Indiana's not known for being first in the nation in anything, especially in physical therapy. But when we get there in a good pace. Other thing that we move forward on is workforce data collection. And through a change in the legislative wording, we now are a mandatory collector of workforce data. And as that continues to come on, that's going to help us inform and affect practice in our state. And then also, Doug kind of talked about it, is the webcasting of meetings. Anyone who doesn't know Indiana, it's like 6 hours, and like I'm on the very southern part of the state. Indianapolis is in the middle, so it's at least a 3-hour drive for me. For a lot of people, it's hard to get to a meeting. Now that people can watch meetings, I've heard more and more from practitioners how this is good for them, that they're able to see what we're doing and get the information firsthand from getting it, and then just the notes that come out on the website. And then common goals. So like I've kind of already talked about is the meeting. Oh, I skipped something totally. On common goals, one of the first things I want to talk about was the board rulings. So we developed the scope of practice ruling system that Doug kind of talked about, that we're now having questions come to the board that they would like the board to answer, and then the board's answering. And again, this is not, we didn't reinvent the wheel, but we've always been silent through our entire history. Now we're actually able to say something. And so like it's been nice to look at other jurisdictions that just put things out all the time and others that don't as much. And we've been able to kind of navigate how we envision we're going to do it. We're in the process of it. We've had our first question answered, which was a really cool experience from my perspective, being able to answer that, and then because it was a good question on practice, and I think it will help give clinicians and the public a better view of how the rule-making process affects daily practice of physical therapy in our state. So that's been a big thing that we move forward on. And that was just now published last month, I believe. One of the things I wanted to also talk about was our partnership with key stakeholders. And this really is a thank you. I want to thank so many people who have been supportive of our board through this process. We have moved from a point of an adversarial relationship with APTA Indiana to more of a cooperative, and that has helped everyone in the profession. That helps members, non-members, all of our providers, which then affects all of the public in our state. And so as that has moved forward, that has been a great push forward. Also, I would like to thank the other board members. Our board is very diverse, but we do a really good job of listening to everyone's opinions and bringing it to a common area where it gives us the best decisions for the person sitting in front of us or for any rulings that we have to make. And that's been a wonderful experience for me to be a part of. And with that, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Toby Schnell, who is our board director. She has been a stabilizing force the last couple of years because when I first got on the board, I think we had a new board director about every meeting. And so it's been nice not to have that, and she's just nice and calm and does a great job of it. And lastly, I want to thank Megan Serto. She has been an amazing mentor to me and to all the board members. She's done a great job of showing us how FSBPT can play a role in where we go and how to implement things and how to get involved in it. And I don't think Indiana's Practice Act would be where it is, or would the board be where it is without her guidance. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, we need a big kapow for first-time attendee Sean. 1, 2, 3, kapow! Well done. Way to bring it. Way to bring it. All right, next up is Lori from Georgia.
Even with the big screen. Okay. I'm Lori Wallace. I'm a physical therapist. This is my 25th year as a PT and my 7th year on the Georgia State Board of Physical Therapy. And in May was actually the first time I made it to the regulatory workshop. So for those of you who are a little bit newer in this realm of being a regulator, I'm giving an unbiased plug to go. Unbiased meaning I'm not technically part of FSBPT, but please go. It was so helpful. A lot of great networking and a lot of great information that I would have liked to have a long time ago. But in the spirit of this event, this is my also first time visiting Iowa. I've been to a lot of states, but not Iowa. Didn't realize it was going to be this cold here. I actually checked before I left Atlanta, and it said it was 75. It's not 75. So thanks for that. But again, playing off of the Iowa theme, as the seasons change, we've had a lot of changes in our board, and specifically wanted to talk to you guys about the relationship of our board and some outside stakeholders. The APTA and APTA Georgia, it was interesting for me when I became a board member to learn the differences in the roles and responsibilities of the professional association versus the regulatory body, and it took a little time to get used to that. But we really have a great dynamic, I believe, after learning how different boards in different states work. Several of us who are currently on the board have also served in leadership roles with the APTA and APTA Georgia. And there's some really key people, especially in Georgia right now on the APTA, who have served in past roles on the state board. So I think that really gives us such a great perspective of respecting how each other come to the table and the lens in which we see things, but also respecting our responsibilities in those. With that, I wanted to take another quick second to say how much we appreciate would never get here without Ann Thompson as our board chair and Stacy Price as our executive director and her whole entire team. The work that these ladies and their teams do behind the scenes is unbelievable. We would not get half of what we've done so far without that extra work that I know they do. So for me, 2015, I was involved I was still, kind of a newbie at that point, but I was involved in legislation that brought direct access into Georgia. I had never been involved in legislation before. I honestly don't care if I ever do it again. It was a lot more emotional than I ever wanted to take part in, but I learned so much and got really some great associations out of it, and again, learned how collaborative the board had to be with the professional association, and that continues to go through. One good thing that came out of the whole COVID thing is the remote. We all learned to work remotely, and we learned to work via video. So we've had all of our meetings via video. We meet every other month. They're open to the public. I can see definitely a lot more public engagement than we've ever had before. I was one of the few people who traveled to the meetings when they were in person. It's about 2.5 hours for me to get to where they were. But at that time, I ran a large market for an outpatient group and felt it was my personal responsibility to know what was going on with the board and changes. But now there's a lot of other people, single stakeholders, and so I'm really proud of us for getting that technology working as quickly as we did and continuing to use it. A couple of things that we've had to navigate over the last couple of years. I don't know exactly that this coincided with the bienniums, but for one biennium, we increased the observation of dry needling, so people now have to have a special designation on their license. And it seems like we did that all around licensing, which was, in Terry's words, it was a little traumatic, which is probably an understatement again, especially for the board staff of trying to get all that done. The next time we went from aptitude to CE broker, which again confuses everybody, and let's be honest, a lot of licensees either don't read or half read instructions, so that led to a lot of extra chaos we all went through. And then this time we navigated to goals, which I really like goals. It was hard to get used to. It was a lot of technology change, and we were kind of the guinea pigs pretty much for the entire state in terms of all of the boards moving over to it. So examples of some of the things specifically that we've done is the APTA Georgia has a liaison who has a permanent spot on our agenda with our board meetings. The board members and our executive director definitely make themselves open. We've done a lot of collaborative events. I think Terry mentioned that we did a webinar to teach folks how to use goals and some of the other challenges that we've gone through, things that we as a board in our state may not be permitted to do for certain reasons. APTA will come to the meetings and they can engage in their realm on those things to get information out to the licensees. We've done a continuing competency course where folks got CEU credits to learn a little bit more about the rules. We've partnered with FSBPT on the Georgia Jam. APTA Georgia helps us with certifying a lot of our CEU units. So again, tons of ways that we've collaborated to make sure that we get information out to our licensees, protect the public, and really have a united voice that we can get out. When folks get frustrated, I know there's another session later about frustrations with the board or what does the public think. I think it's a huge selling power, if you will, to have your state association and maybe others on your side, or at least to understand why we're doing what we're doing, that it is to protect the public, and that if we can go together, that really helps the collective. So for the last lightning round, we'd like to be able to give you some reasons or just facilitate some discussion about other things that you can do in your areas to foster collaboration with outside stakeholders. So, thank you.
Wow. Wonderful job. Can I get a great big kapow that the front desk is going to hear? Ready? Kapow! Oh, that's very good. Wonderful job. All right, next up is Matt from South Dakota.
Greetings. I'm a new board member on a fairly new board. South Dakota started a new board in July of 23, and prior we were under the South Dakota Board of Medical and Osteopathic Examiners, and when there was a physical therapy related item that was brought to them, they were often kind of quiet or dismissive. And so being a new board, we'd like to, when licensees reach out, give them some information without giving them legal advice. And so our president, Patty Berg Pope, created a document that now lives on our website that licensees can use, or if they do contact us, we can direct them to it to get some advice. Let's see. So basically, the way Patty went about making this, she borrowed from other allied healthcare professionals who had a similar document. It was modified to meet, or modified to be more suitable with physical therapy, and then we added a scope of practice document from the APTA House of Delegates. And then us as a board met to refine it a little bit more. And as I mentioned, what we created was something to just be, to guide decision-making and some reflection for a licensee, but is not legal advice. Did that advance? There we go. Okay, so on the left, what you'll see is from the APTA House of Delegates, their definition of scope of practice, and then on the right is that borrowed item from other allied healthcare professionals that just helps guide a licensee. Okay, so you all may know this, but I'm new to FSBPT and this whole world. I've just been a clinician for 20-some years, and so bear with me here if you already know this. But APTA breaks scope of practice down into 3 parts: professional scope, which I guess I think of as kind of at a national level, so it's based on your education. It's something that evolves over time with advances in research and technology, with changes in societal needs. And it includes interaction on an individual level, like with a patient or a client, but also in the public health realm, like at a community level. So scope of practice then funnels down to the state level, your jurisdictional state practice, and then funnels down to your personal level. Do you have the education and training to, say, provide a certain procedure, and are you competent to perform that? And then at the bottom of that column on that document, I'm pushing the down arrow. Spacebar? Spacebar works. Okay. So then it just also is a little blurb that this is not, again, legal advice. This is for just decision-making guidance only. So then on the right side, it's hard to see on there's a lot of text here, but basically the first question that's asked is, as a licensee, are you prohibited by any rule or regulation? Are there any ethics considerations or codes of conduct that would prevent you from carrying out the activity or intervention or role that you've communicated and had a question about? And if the answer is no, then the licensees ask themselves, is this consistent with your education, national standards, institutional policies and procedures, institutional accreditation standards? So then if they answer yes to that, are there any practice settings, policies and procedures in place to perform this? If they answer yes, it gets to an item that maybe I'll learn more about from the ethics committee. Is this reasonable or prudent? This one I kind of flagged when we talked about it, because to me reasonable and prudent is this like pie in the sky idea, but I think I'll learn maybe later that there's something tangible or more succinct to it. If they answer yes, then do you have the knowledge, skill, and experience to perform? And then do you have the resources to perform? And then could you manage the results or assume accountability or liability, maybe if something went negative? And then last, you need to be approved or credentialed to do so. So basically, if you move through this and you answered no to the first item and yes to the rest, you can proceed. And if not, it directs you to stop. We did strike at least one item I can remember, and that was, is the activity role or intervention reimbursable? And I asked us to remove that because there are some things that we do that are in our scope of practice that aren't reimbursable. So that didn't seem like it belonged on there. But since we're a new board and this is a new document, certainly open to getting feedback too, because this is something that we can continue to work on and evolve over time.
Wow, that was a lot of work. Thank you, Matt. Can we give him a giant kapow? That wasn't loud enough. Kapow! Much better, much better. All right, next up we have Jennifer from Wisconsin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Garrett. I am from Wisconsin. I work at the Department of Safety and Professional Services, which is an umbrella agency that regulates occupational licensing. We have a bunch of other things in our jurisdiction too, but most of those don't relate to you, like septic systems and construction regulation. I'm also on the board of directors for the Council on Licensure Enforcement and Regulation, or CLEAR. Many of you also attend their events. And when I was walking in today, I ran into someone that I knew from a CLEAR event, and she said, "You're at the wrong conference." And in a lot of ways, it feels like that. I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not a board member. I'm not an executive director. I'm a political appointee in the secretary's office at a cabinet agency. But we happen to regulate occupational licensing. But as a political appointee who represents the governor, one of my jobs is to make sure that the governor is successful in implementing his policies and his vision for the state. And we are 2 years into his second term. He hasn't said anything, but many of us suspect it's probably his last term. And so we have 2 years left for what we consider legacy projects and legacy initiatives. So what kind of transformational change can we implement in the next 2 years that will take root and take hold and be really, really difficult to unwind and walk back by any administration that comes next, and that will continue to do good for the people of Wisconsin? And two of the things that we are working very hard toward happen to be two things that have emerged out of physical therapy and the HRRI. And when I was at the CLEAR conference recently and I attended a presentation on it, I started Googling to see, what is the website and what can I learn? And when I saw that they were connected, I thought, I need to connect with them. This is important work for us. I have 26 months to make it happen, and there's already this group that's doing it. So those two things that we're working really hard on are implementing workforce surveys across more of our professions. We have a statutory survey for nurses that is way too long and has kind of tainted opinions in our state about what a workforce survey should be. So we're kind of setting that aside and excluding that from the conversation from most of our discussions. Then we've recently implemented two other voluntary surveys, a survey for our physicians and a survey for dentists. Those emerged from conversations with the Department of Health Services that was looking to gather better information for their HPSA designations. They had been doing that independently, sending out surveys, calling, just essentially duplicating a lot of the initial contact that we were already doing at the point of renewal. So we partnered with them to implement those voluntary surveys. We've learned a lot and we've gotten better at it. We've also learned we don't want to be beholden to a separate agency partner who isn't running the show because we run the renewal but is calling the shots. So we want our own surveys, we want our own systems, and that's how we found our way to the cross-profession minimum data set. And so we are looking to implement that in our behavioral health renewals, which open 6 weeks or so. So that's one of our major initiatives. We would like to broaden it across more professions and gather more information so that we can make those comparisons to professions, but also just generate more insight for the state. And then the other thing that we've been working on for several years that started with a conversation with the physician's assistants board chair and me. She just wanted to talk to agency leadership because a physician assistant had been struggling with mental illness and ended up killing his wife or his partner and then committing suicide. And they were both physician assistants. And she was very traumatized by this and was looking for us as the regulator to address the issue. And I know all of you know this, that our renewal questions and our initial licensing questions and our concern about impairment definitely affects individuals' willingness to report, but also to seek treatment, because if they seek treatment, then they have to report. And so she was asking us to do some work on that and to improve the way we as the regulator handle impairment, substance abuse, mental illness, and physical impairment in our regulatory process. I have to tell you, moving that needle is hard. There is a lot of resistance, and a lot of it comes from our lawyers. And our chief legal counsel's office is next door to mine. And that's probably the toughest sell, but we're working on it. And so one of the things that we're doing is looking to hopefully get in the governor's budget a broad wellness program for all health professions, really geared at helping get a kind of a supportive monitoring program so that any licensed professionals who are struggling can stay in practice at the highest level of safe practice. But when I was at the CLEAR conference, I saw the presentation on the self-assessment tool, and I thought that would be a great thing to start with and to implement with at least one of our boards. And when I learned a little bit more about it, it seems like it's a really viable and possible first step for us, and will really establish a good foundation for future work in wellness. And so I guess the last thing I would like to say to you is we heard a little bit about how we work, regulators work in silos, and or we often hear about that, and physical therapists work on physical therapy issues, and nurses work on nursing issues. But many of your issues are broad, and they apply to all professions. I mean, boundary issues, that's everywhere. And so I just really applaud all of you for being leaders in this space, and want to let you know that people like me want to work hard to take some of the work that you've done and spread isn't the right word, but implement it across professions, because when we do that, that's when we really achieve transformational change. So I guess that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Spread may not be the right word, but the right word is kapow! Woo! How about a nice warm round of applause for all of our presenters? What great jobs they did. Phenomenal. What great things. Grab them in the hallway, ask them a little bit more about what they're doing and how you can learn more about it. This QR code takes for all the keynote speeches, everything through the FSBPT updates, up through this lightning round. So take a moment, fill out this survey. We want your responses. We need your feedback. This whole session came around because of your feedback. Please complete it. And then we are on break, and we have our breakout rooms directly behind me. So head this direction. There's the next kind of set of rooms behind this is the final group. So 2 directly behind me, 1 more in the next kind of module behind it. So plenty of time to get there. Fill this out, and thank you very much.